The person I am when I'm talking on a stage as Dr. Cook, Executive Director of Military Mentors, is the same person who's Lieutenant Colonel Chevy Cook in uniform. When I'm online, offline, on here, in front of my friends, in pajamas or in a suit or in a uniform overseas or in front of friends, I'm the same person. It makes life so much easier when you're integrated.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Inner Wealth, the Forbes Ignite podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Cacal, CEO of Forbes Ignite, and every week I'll be sharing with you my conversations with unique, creative, and innovative people across all different industries. These are people who are intellectually curious explorers who are also redefining what it means to be successful today. From personal to professional, we cover it all to understand what drives our guests to blaze their own trails and create nimble solutions within the industries that touch each of our lives. Our guest today is Dr. Chevy Cook, U.S. Army officer, as well as executive director and co-founder of the nonprofit Military Mentors. Chevy is an inspiration as an integrated leader who shows up as his authentic self wherever he goes. As a father, husband, military officer, and nonprofit executive, it is amazing how he does it all. We talk about framing experiences by failing fast and failing forward, the golden key opportunity of education, leadership, mentorship, and so much more. I know you're gonna love what he has to say. Here's our chat. Hey, Chevy, how's it going? It is so wonderful for you to be here, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks for having me today. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to talk with you. And hopefully I say something that doesn't bore one of your listeners.
No, of course not. So we've had the opportunity to work together over the last little while, and we've known each other for quite a bit of time. And I always wondered, why are we not doing a podcast together? Because you always have so many wonderful things to say. And so it's such a privilege having you here.
Well, thank you. You've set the bar high. Now I must beat the bar. So thank you.
So tell us, what have you been up to lately?
So just really recently, I hosted a conference this past weekend for militarymentors.org, our nonprofit. And it was our first in-person conference. It was only about 50 people. It was down there on the waterfront in Alexandria. So it was a beautiful backdrop. And we had a very kind of purposeful, intentional gathering for the day, only 8 to 3 in the afternoon. So short duration, no technology. So my presenters weren't allowed to use slides or anything like that.
Wow.
And we went over a couple kind of unique things throughout the day. We talked about some resilience. We talked about grit. I had a message from people heard from Angela Duckworth, for example. And we went over something called a failure resume. So there were some tears in the room where people were sharing their personal failures with each other and out in public. Failure resume being the opposite of, a successful, the resume that we all have. So we had kind of purposeful, intentional things like that based on trying to make people better leaders and better mentors. And part of being a leader, part of being a mentor is definitely authenticity. Mm-hmm. So trying to explore the range of emotions that day. And we just had a good time. So that was a recent project that was really, really taking up a lot of my time. But when it all came to fruition on Saturday, it was fantastic. Outside of that, I'm just doing what everybody else is doing a bit of telework, working hard in the Pentagon in my day job in the military, and trying to be a good dad and husband, obviously in the home. Though I say that last, it is 100% my first priority.
That's incredible. And I love the failure resume. I had never heard of that before, but I feel like a lot of people can learn a lot about each other in a more authentic way, like you said, through listing out what people typically call failures, but they're learning opportunities. So I'm a strong believer in that.
Yeah. So it wasn't my idea. It's, you Google search it and you'll see that it's kind of trending as the last couple of five or 6 years. You'll see stuff about failure resumes in New York Times, Harvard Business Review, et cetera, et cetera. But usually when we talk about failure, especially within this space, it's about entrepreneurship, right? Failing fast or failing forward. We don't really talk about it in a personal way. And I shared on Saturday that recent research, as recent as 2018 from the American Psychological Association, would say that failure, actually, when you do the research on it, is associated with harming our ego and our sense of kind of personal worth, but it doesn't actually affect your performance, right? The trend line is that if you are kind of what people would consider a weak performer and you fail, you kind of stay a weak performer. If you are a strong performer and you fail, you stay a strong performer. It's just kind of framing those experiences as learning experiences so we can hopefully not be a failure in the true sense by repeating the same mistakes over and over. I think somebody said, doing the same thing over and over, thinking you're going to get a different outcome is the definition of insanity.
Yep.
So I like to also put is the definition of true failure. Change the insanity out for failure at the end. If you just keep doing the same thing with the same bad results, then of course it's going to be a trend line that's negatively skewed.
No, absolutely. So Chevy, we actually have a few things in common. We both spent some time in El Paso.
Yes.
I've seen, and we both spent some time at Columbia.
Yes.
So you are probably one of the most highly educated military officers I've ever had the pleasure of knowing.
Thank you.
So what led you to 2 master's degrees and a PhD in human development?
To be honest, 2 things, and we'll have to go in the Wayback Machine for this. So I grew up in a low SES or socioeconomic status kind of background, typical 80s neighborhood, kind of ghetto, unfortunately drug infested, and some other bad things going on in my neighborhood when I was young. And my mom, Mama J, told me the only way that I was going to change those circumstances, get out of those circumstances, was to get that kind of universal key, a golden key, opportunity. And in her mind, she framed it as it was education. And my mom is not a college graduate. So she was like, at 18, guess what you will do? You will go to college. You will get out of this neighborhood. There are no ifs and buts about it. And oh, by the way, you have to do it for free. So I think that started me on my journey of looking for opportunity. And that was kind of the first thing that kind of pushed me in that direction. And then I went to the United States Military Academy as my undergrad. And then that kind of just opened my eyes to many other opportunities out there. Now, the second thing that pushed me kind of in this direction is my wife. As she thought about the things, I had taken advantage of a free education through West Point. She was like, hey, are there other opportunities for us, for you out there? If so, let's chase those things down. So I get the opportunity to get my first master's degree, and it was really eye-opening. Go to a big state university, something really different on the border of the United States with Mexico, and just see a different culture, be around different people, as opposed to just being in a uniform. And it really, really whet my appetite for this thing called education. And then there was an opportunity to go to school again, to go back and teach at West Point, to return to my institution and give back. And so they said, hey, come on back. And oh, by the way, you can stop off and get you another master's degree. So that time I got the chance to go to a great Ivy League institution, right? Completely different than UTEP, very different than the military academy as well. But again, Harlem, culture, something different. And then there, as I was doing homework, thinking that I would never do this again because it was so much, my wife is like, she's in the background. I still remember this like it was yesterday. She's like, you need to figure out how to get a PhD. And I was like, say what? No, we're not doing that. And she was like, no, you are, because you have the capacity to do it. We're having a good time as you get to be a student and not deploy and not be gone all the time. You just get to go to class and look at how you're growing and expanding. Let's do this again with a doctoral program. So, I listen. Happy wife, happy life is something they say in the military. And I listened to her and she pushed me. And then I went off to get a PhD at Tufts. Again, another great institution, but very different than the previous 2. Boston is much different than going to school in New York, and being also connected during that time to Harvard, being connected to MIT, were also some other great experiences I had while I was there. In the finance world, there's Wall Street. In the educational kind of space, there's Boston. So I really appreciated the chance to be there. And maybe we can talk about the type of degree I got, but really it was about kind of expanding this ability to have opportunity, and almost $500,000 worth of education now for free. I just had to pay with time and service, and I'm creeping up on 19 years of service in the military.
Wow, congratulations.
Now, so thank you. Yeah.
That is incredible. So how would you say your PhD in human development has contributed to the work that you're doing right now?
Greatly. I've done a lot of interesting and unique things in the military, and done some hard stuff as well, some dangerous stuff, life-threatening stuff for sure. However, the most developmental thing I have ever done is go through the rigors of a terminal degree. Just that alone, learning how to research, learning how to think both quantitatively and qualitatively. I focused on mixed methods and multi-methods, really heavily on the qualitative side though. Going through that, the rigor of putting my stuff up to snuff, right? Like making sure it was up to snuff of the rigors of academia at that level was really, really stretching for me. Now that stretch then pulled me in a direction that, coming back to the military, being on a ginormous staff up here in the Pentagon allows me to look at problems, big problems, in a different way. I research differently. I think differently. I apply those kind of skill sets, much less the knowledge that I learned in a different manner. And the other part there is once you got a doctorate, like everybody, they call you doctor and stuff. So, here comes the doctor. Here he comes. Like, it's kind of hushed whispers and jokes when you come in the room. They expect you to be a big thinker. That's how it's changed and how I've had to apply it too. Because, I can't say something that's silly or short-sighted, or I can't just flippantly work through a problem set because people are going to place that expectation on me that I'm just going to put a little bit more rigor on it, whether that be academic or not. They just expect me to think broader and bigger and deeper. So that has taught me a lot too. But specifically having a PhD in human development has really taught me how to, in the military sense, connect with others and really understand their development. And in the nonprofit space with regard to mentoring, really understand how relationships like mentoring can be an environmental factor that deeply invests in others. So, the rigor of understanding how people develop, specifically how they develop character is what I studied, has been a boon to leadership and mentorship for me.
That's incredible. And you perfectly answered my question about what are the commonalities and differences between academia and your military service. So I know you work in the mentorship space. Now I have to turn the question to you.
Yes.
Have you ever had any mentors or any heroes that have attracted you to the work that you're doing today?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mentioned my mom, Mama J. She's always going to be a hero. What I haven't said here, but I've said in other places, is that the person I call mom, Mama J, is my adopted mother. She was actually my next door neighbor in that neighborhood many, many years ago that I talked about earlier. And she took us in. She never married. She never had any other kids, just me and my brother. So, her mailbox used to be the finish line for us racing on bikes and on foot. And then that became my home. I ran one time and never left. Right. So she's always been a hero for me. Very powerful person in my life because of the sacrifices and stuff she made. You just don't hear of kind of those stories anymore, I feel like, at least. So she's definitely a hero in my life. A couple other heroes and mentors, or, when she said you got to get out of here, Corey Roberts in 5th grade asked me where I wanted to be in 5 years. And I was kind of flippant back to him about, I want to be in high school. And then he asked me all these kind of questions afterward that I couldn't answer and said, hey, if you weren't so flippant and a class clown and you put that energy toward your future, maybe you could be something someday. Right. So that was a big kind of turning point for me as a little 11 or 12-year-old, that when I was in high school and I heard somebody talk about West Point, right, I was thinking about those 5 years, like Mr. Corey Roberts said, and that's what probably got me to West Point. Also, while I was in high school, I met this guy named Tom Grimes. He was a Vietnam veteran, retired lieutenant colonel, had served 2 tours in Vietnam. And he was my ROTC instructor. And he's the person who brought in the person to talk about West Point. So see how it's all like interconnected? And Colonel Grimes had said, he had always kind of pushed us and had us looking toward the future. And he knew my situation. He knew I was growing up with a father. He's very much a hero, mentor, father figure in my life. And he just pushed me. Back then, you couldn't apply online. We had to do everything on a typewriter and write everything out for my essays. It's a whole process to get to West Point. He made me come in during lunch and he lorded over me as I sat at the keyboard and sat at the typewriter and punched this essay out. He made sure I got it done. So I could keep going, but my mom, Corey Roberts, Paul Thomas Grimes, for sure, are 3 big ones in my life.
That's extremely powerful. And I'm sure that has led you to starting your own military nonprofit specifically toward mentorship. So what is it like straddling both worlds, being a nonprofit executive and a U.S. Army military officer?
Ooh, that's a great question. So some would describe it as trying to balance on a sword, right? It's so razor thin, right? And it's sharp. So sometimes it can be difficult. But what I want to do is get people to think about what I actually do, which is integration. I don't really parse them out. I layer them together. So for me, these different kind of aspects of me actually bolster, I think, my leader ability as a father first, as a husband next, as a military officer, and as a nonprofit leader. So I've learned a lot from being in both spaces. In the military, you got rank on your chest. People will do what you say just because your position. And in the nonprofit space, especially when you lead a team of volunteers like I do, that ain't happening, right? Like they got to believe in your vision and your mission and your values and your cause, and they can leave at any moment. They don't care what your rank or position is, that I'm the, quote unquote, executive director. So what I've learned in that space and taken back to the military is a different kind of ways of influencing and connecting with volunteers who don't just listen to you for rank and position. Right. And then from the military, what I brought over is this amount of structure and forecasting and planning that the military is really known for. I bring that over to the nonprofit space to say, hey, this is how we're going to maybe approach this problem or get after this challenge. We can be very methodical and logical. So they're very much blended, but I will tell you, it is a unique balance to strike at all times.
I love that. Like you said, it's trying to inspire a group of people to work with you along the way, and not necessarily because of military rank and authority. It's because they want to and they're inspired by you. So that's extremely powerful. So can you tell us a story about some of the most impactful things that you've encountered as a nonprofit executive?
Ooh. I'd be cheating to go back to our recent experience this weekend at the moment, because it was actually extremely powerful. But maybe I'll go back a little bit further and we can circle back to the moment if we want to, and maybe invite some folks to come to our next one. That'll be this summer. Here's something I really learned that was really impactful for me from this nonprofit stuff. We first started our platform about 6.5 years ago. We were kind of based on our website, like a Match.com for mentoring or a Christian Mingle or something like that. We had an algorithm, it was like we put all the resources in there, and we wanted to connect folks and let them connect and pair with each other based off these kind of algorithms and push them out into the world and let them kind of do their own thing. And it wasn't really working out. I mean, this was our startup idea and this is what we really wanted to do, but it really wasn't working. And an organization came along and was like, hey, we want you to run this 3-hour seminar. And we were like, we don't do that. We pair mentors with mentees. But they were like, oh, well, we kind of actually, you seem like you have some expertise in this area. Why don't you come run this seminar? And we really realized that the universe was talking to us in a certain way, was requesting something of us. And in the end of the day, we really wanted to make a dent in the universe. Steve Jobs said, you gotta really poke. And you see, you poke the universe and you see what comes out. So the universe was inviting us to poke, and we did. So, we listened and we ran that seminar, and then we ran multiple seminars over years for that organization. And then we grew into what we are now, no longer with an algorithmic kind of process on our website, and no longer kind of pairing mentors and mentees. And the major kind of inspiration or takeaway there was the ability to listen to what the community and what consequentially the universe was asking of us and stepping into that space. A lot of people come into the nonprofit realm looking at very difficult problems and hard challenges for our communities, but they have an idea on how they can impact the community and don't remain intellectually humble and curious enough to actually go into that space or into that community saying, well, I got these ideas on how I can kind of address this challenge, but maybe I just need to listen. Now, anybody who's seen a picture of me or wants to Google me, look me up. I'm Lonely Chevy Cook on the planet. We'll see that I got pretty big ears. They really poke out, right? So by default, I'm supposed to listen. I think I was built that way physically to actually listen. And so that was a big kind of inspiration for us, that we saw that once we did listen, everything started happening. And it comes full circle to this event we just had this weekend. People were asking us to do this. And we're like, well, we don't run conferences. Well, we sure did. We put one on, right?
Yeah.
Because people were asking for us to step into this space and asking for us to bring these people together, asking for this creation of this community, and asking for something in person with all this COVID stuff going on, asking for us to be present and connected. And that's what we did. And it was really powerful.
That's amazing. And the thing that people can learn from this story is that you can have the most impressive, most eloquent technology out there, but it is all about your ability to incorporate feedback into whatever product, whatever service you're doing. It's really all about listening.
Absolutely.
So that's extremely powerful. I love that.
Absolutely. Technology is cool, right? Like we've all grown up to use, I am in a room full. I have 3 computers right next to me in this room right now. I have a cell phone that's just as powerful as a computer. I have an iPod right here that has just as much storage as my phone does. It's all this technology. I'm looking at multiple screens in front of me. I have an external screen. I'm on a microphone. I have headphones. It's so much technology in this room right now. But all of this means nothing without the human touch, without the human ear, without the human eye, without the human mind, and ultimately without the human heart. So, all these wazoo gadgets, your stand-up desk and everything else that you got going, and the cool, we need to have a running treadmill, a desk in the office when we bring everybody to that, all that stuff, that Gucci stuff means nothing without the human. So I've really learned along the way that the platform is just the platform. At the end of the day, it's about kind of this human connection. And surely that's what mentorship and leadership is about. You can have all the greatest equipment in the world, but it'll never, ever mean or amount to anything. They're just paperweights without the human.
I love that. They're just paperweights without the human. So what would you say to anyone who is interested in being involved in military mentors?
So I would ask that they find us on the internet, Google us up, and you'll find us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. There's the 4th one. That's just showing my age. You can also find us on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. And then we have a regular website, militarymentors.org. I would invite you to go see what we're about. You can see who we are and our bios and our background, our history. You can see our nonprofit work. You see some of the services we offer. But you can also look at 2 particular pages, one about the conference we just ran called The Moment. It's spelled with 2 M's at the beginning because military mentors, we call ourselves MM for short. But you could also go there and find out about our emissary program, another program that we run. So once again, we were listening to the universe some years ago. Some people were asking me how they could be more involved with the organization, just like you're asking. Mm-hmm. And at first I didn't know what to do with these folks. I just was like collecting emails and numbers and things. And then along the way, we came up with this idea to run the emissary program. So it's spelled like emissary. Again, it has 2 M's for MM. And the emissary program is a 6-month cohort-based leader development program that we put on. It's 1 Saturday a month. We require that folks write an article, and we help them through that. They also do a mentoring project, which helps them dent the universe in their own space. We just kind of flip the idea of a community service project. So in most programs, you would go, if it were 10 or 12 of you, you go to Habitat for Humanity, you build a house together. It's a really enriching and powerful experience, but it's one experience. We have flipped that the other way. And we say, okay, we select 10 to 12 people for the cohort. We need 10 to 12 different projects. So they do their own projects, and they range from, we've had a person start up a podcast, The Earful of Leadership. We've had a person start up a nonprofit that caters to homeless folks in the DC area called DMV Does Good. We've had people obviously gather food and whatnot for the sick and shut in for COVID. We've had people go back to their home island in the Caribbean and pass projectors, laptops, and computers for local schools.
Wow.
Ginormous projects. But it's just because we flipped it the other way and said, you did the universe how you want to, and we'll help facilitate. We've become kind of an incubator of sorts with regard to that kind of good idea space. So that's what emissaries do as a culminating kind of exercise. And they're everything. They are young, old, military, non-military, veteran, no affiliation with the service. We've had people from academia. We've even had a couple people from London, so it's international as well. And it's webinar based, and it will, for the foreseeable future, also remain webinar based. So you can connect with us from afar. We will eventually get into doing an in-person cohort, and we will let people choose either the in-person cohort or the webinar based cohort. So you can learn about the emissaries and get very involved with us.
I love that. And you just reminded me of something that I actually learned about from you, and you described it as the adjacent possible. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
So you're actually instilling the adjacent possible within your nonprofit as well. And I've taken that and I've incorporated that into Forbes Ignite. So tell us about the adjacent possible with the work that you're doing.
So the concept for people that want to look a little bit further into it is from Steven Johnson. He has a book called Where Good Ideas Come From. And one of the chapters is entitled The Adjacent Possible. And in it, he's talking about you being open and receptive to what's right kind of next to you and expanding that space so you can see. And in the book, he kind of describes it as, imagine being in a room and being in just four walls closed off. You're just kind of in a box. But as you experience things and do things, you actually like put a window on a wall or you open a door on a wall. And then all of a sudden, there's some other space there that's connected to you now. Or maybe you can look out on the lawn and see something go across in the street and like, oh, I hadn't thought about that before. So now you can pull in these other ideas, and that good ideas can come from something that's right next, just over the horizon. That's just right here, right? So for me in this kind of mentorship space or this leadership space, it's not just expanding your box. Like people always say the phrase, think outside of the box. I would say thinking outside of the box is impossible. Most people don't like to hear that, but I'm going to tell you right now, you can't think outside of the box. When you think somebody in the room really came up with an out of the box idea, they were doing one of two things. One, their box was bigger than yours, which is fine. They have more experiences within that box that they have, which is why they can come up with the idea. Or they were seeing something in the adjacent possible. They saw something in your box and they lifted it up and kind of toyed with it a little bit, kind of like a Rubik's Cube, and came out with, a different shape. So that's kind of how I think of the adjacent possible, and how we need to just kind of be open and recognize what's around us so we can adapt and kind of tweak some of those opportunities that might be right next to us.
I absolutely love that. And that's something that people can apply in their professional lives and their personal lives. So that's extremely powerful.
I was thinking this weekend, we had, obviously this is a leader development conference and mentorship conference, but I had a speaker in there that was talking about they were a hostage in Somalia for 93 days, wow, a decade ago. And I had someone walk up to me afterward when they saw what she was going to speak about and saw the topic. They were like, how does this apply to like leadership and mentorship? And then when they heard them speak and talked about the resilience, the grit, the way she was planning her life, the will she was kind of putting into that moment that was really hard and difficult. This person said this was perfect for this conference because we never know what we're going to get ourselves into. They were presenting us with some adjacent possible ideas that I would never kind of put in the frame of this type of conference, but it fit so well. And I bring it up to just say, a lot of times we kind of have this kind of staccato, real kind of inflexible way of looking at issues and challenges and problems. And then you just need to like expand your view by bringing different people around. You've done a beautiful job with Forbes Ignite and some of the work that I've gotten to do with you, where we come from so many different backgrounds and experiences. And then we kind of all work on this one problem set that none of us are experts in, but all of us have kind of these different abilities around. And you can really see that the old adage that synergy 2 + 2 = 5 or greater really can happen.
Yeah, the project that we did was highly inspired by what you told me, specifically with the adjacent possibles. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome. Thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Of course. And so I ask this question to everybody on my podcast. Chevy, how would you define success?
That's an interesting question. And I've thought about it a lot. And I was asked a couple of years ago, and I gave a kind of really wonky response that I've come to really hang on to. So I don't think I can actually define success in my current state or of being. I think I won't be able to really define success until, it's kind of those last moments. And hopefully I'm really old. And hopefully I'm in a room surrounded by people I've impacted and loved and cared for. And hopefully they'll be telling me a story about success at that point. I think success, at least for me, has to be defined in a very reflective way. And it also has to be defined by others. Mm-hmm. So undoubtedly, someone could consider me a success if you look up my resume or if you look me up on LinkedIn and you tick off all the things that I've been fortunate enough to be placed in the position to have the opportunity to succeed with. But for me, those are just kind of points along a journey. It'd be like walking along the Appalachian Trail. This is a hill I climbed over. This is a ravine I walked through. This is a moment, maybe the PhD is when I sat on top of a mountaintop and watched the sun come up one morning. But there's still so much more walking to do on the Appalachian Trail. So, the end of the Appalachian Trail for me is when I'm at the end of my, lifespan. And people are sitting around asking me stories about the Appalachian Trail, about the life. And then they're pointing out moments of success that maybe I didn't even know about, or moments of impact where they're like, Chevy, this really meant something for me and you didn't even know it. That's how I will define success at the very end. And if those people aren't there, and if they're not around, and I'm sitting lonely and broken and not so reflective, then I will say I wasn't a success. So yet to be defined. That's how I look at it.
That is beautiful. And as you were speaking, you're just having me reimagine some things that I would want to achieve and to take a look around me and ensure that there are the people there that can be that mirror for that success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, a lot of times we're kind of in this rat race of chasing things down. But, I've been really, really blessed along the way, especially, kind of being in a mentorship space, that every now and then I get an email, a text about something that I didn't even know I was doing or didn't even know was impactful. And it's like really, really eye-opening to know that you're just trying to do good. And then someone along the way comes and says, Sir, Chevy, Dr. Cook, this moment meant so much to me and you don't even know, but let me tell you how it's impacted me, my family, my kids, my command, my organization, my team. Those are moments that are like, oh my goodness, they're unreal, but they are real at the same time. And the older I get and the more I kind of zoom out and just reflect and look at how things are around me and how I want to impact the universe. I want people to help me define what that is, as opposed to me saying like, this accomplishment was the best thing I ever did, or making this list or getting this award. Not so much. It's so much better for it to be defined by others to me.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Well, Chevy, it has been such a pleasure speaking with you. And I learned so much from this conversation alone. And there's always so much that I learned from you. So this conversation was no different. Thanks so much for joining me. And I hope we get to do this again soon.
Thanks, Nicole. You're a wonderful beam of light in what can be dark times at times. I know COVID is not easy for everybody and being sheltered off is not easy for everybody. But you've always been a very kind of bright light. And we have never met in person, but I tell you what, when we do, I hope your preference is hug, high five, elbow bump, whatever, fist bump, whatever it may be. I owe you like 1,000 of those. So thanks for what you do. Thanks for inviting me on this. Thanks for inviting me to Forbes Ignite. Thanks for being that light, and please have a good rest of your day.
Oh, same here. The feelings are absolutely mutual. Thanks so much, Chevy.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of Inner Wealth. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and that you'll join us next week as we continue to explore all the ways success is being redefined in our ever-changing world. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite podcast app, and follow us on Instagram at Forbes Ignite for more thought-provoking content and opportunities to engage with us. I'm your host, Nicole Cacal. Thanks for joining us.